Hi, this is Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to the Epstein Project podcast. I am speaking to you today from my new speaker. So please let me know what the volume sounds like to you, if you want it higher, lower, if you want me to speak faster, slower. For those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you had a good one. I do not necessarily go in for a big holiday. So what I did was I cooked on Wednesday so that I would not, I wouldn't have to do it yesterday. And it worked out really, really well. However, my research continues and I want to share with you something that I put on Twitter. Right, I can't. Okay, I'm trying to get to a screen and it's not going to let me do that. Let's see if I can get to the screen in another way. I'm trying to get to my Twitter so that I can share with you the fact that, I have been for a while. Oh, and before I get started, please like the video. I always forget. Like the video, subscribe. We'll be doing another one with Jeremy Roth-Kushel probably later today. And, he and I always do such deep dives. In any event, I've always been a little suspicious of the way that not just mainstream media, but the way that some people have attempted to describe the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell alleged child trafficking ring. And while, I've had certain ideas, I really didn't put them down, let's say on Twitter, because I wasn't really sure that I was correct. However, if for those of you who read Ghislaine Maxwell, an unauthorized biography, and right now I'm working on the sequel, Ghislaine Maxwell Blackmail. I did manage in the first book to suggest that the trafficking network of Epstein and Maxwell connected to a network that involved the models in France, specifically with Karen Mulder. And I've got several videos about Karen as it pertains to the fact that she did disclose or attempt to disclose that she was part of a sex slave ring. It involved politicians and police, and it reached all the way to the top. And she was forced to sort of be with Prince Albert of Monaco. And so that if you have read Ghislaine Maxwell, an unauthorized biography, is there. However, we have other intelligence connected child trafficking rings. And so I went back and looked at my notes for the finders. And the finders were basically just that. They were sort of, this group of guys that would look for children. It started in the 1960s. They were not really caught until the 1980s, I believe, at which point, after the local authorities got involved and there were some children that were found with these men, the children were in a state of, they were not well kept. Your children are your most prized possessions, your most prized, the loves of your life. And typically, your children look well dressed. They look well cared for. They look okay. These children didn't look like that. They looked dirty. They looked hungry. They looked tired. However, the CIA interfered and said, oh, this is an internal situation and we're going to handle it. So just as soon as it hit, I think it was some small mainstream newspaper, again, in Florida, a small one, not like, it didn't make the New York Times, it didn't make any of the bigger newspapers. It disappeared. And then, of course, after that, we have the story of Johnny Gosch, who was 12 years old when he disappeared, as he was going on his paperboy delivery thing in the morning. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and he disappeared. And so it's like, okay. And it's apparently later on with the Franklin scandal, Bonacci, let me see his first name here. Let me just find, because I can't get to my notes. Somehow it's not letting me get to my notes today. So I think it's well, anyway, there was one of the victims. Initially, there were 80 children who stepped forward for the Franklin scandal. And pretty much we now know it as the Franklin cover-up. But if you look at Wikipedia, it says that it's it's hard to even say this. That's why I'm pausing, because it's really heartbreaking. It says that it's a hoax, a carefully constructed hoax. So again, Johnny Gosch was 12 when he was kidnapped 1 block away from his home. And it was later revealed that it was a planned plot, that he had been identified before his disappearance as a boy who fit the profile of the type of victim they were looking for. So they, the way that it was later discovered was that Gosch was drugged. They kind of like injected him with some kind of drug so that he wouldn't fight, and tossed into a van. Then it changed out to another van. This was several men, in addition to Bonacci, who is one of the children who were involved with the Franklin child abuse, and who later, when their sexual, when they were sort of deemed to be maybe getting too old to be abused, they were also being concurrently trained to become procurers. And that is how it is believed that Johnny Gosch became abducted, because he spoke to someone who was only maybe 2 years older than he. So he kind of thought, okay, well, maybe I'm told not to speak to strangers, but maybe that means adults. And it really means children too. It means teenagers. It means everyone. If you tell your children don't speak to strangers, make sure that you tell them don't speak to anyone who you do not know, because the same thing happened in the Jeffrey Epstein Ghislaine Maxwell case, where the children who were lured into this trafficking ring were taught to become procurers. So this happened, and when these 80 children began talking, and it basically made it into a courtroom, really, by that point, they had all been terrified. Some of them had been killed, literally killed. During the time that information about this ring was coming out, it was alleged that some of the victims would be murdered in front of other victims in order to scare them. Other things came out, but it's very disturbing, and I don't want to get into that right now. So, okay, we have that ring. And like I said, these things are kind of really similar to the way that the Epstein Maxwell trafficking ring conducted themselves. So, for example, if we remember how Virginia Giuffre worked at Mar-a-Lago, and her testimony during the time that she sued Ghislaine Maxwell in 2015 for defamation. In that lawsuit, there were a lot of documents that we have been able to read in order to get a better perspective on this. In those documents, she recounts how Ghislaine sort of, came into Mar-a-Lago, struck up a conversation with her, invited her to Epstein's house afterwards, so on and so forth. From the driver's side, his deposition says that they were driving down the street and that Ghislaine said, "Stop," that, she had noticed someone. Well, whether she noticed her at that moment or maybe she noticed her before. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell would go to Mar-a-Lago all the time. We have seen photographs of her, Epstein, Prince Andrew, many of their friends at Mar-a-Lago. So she may have noticed her before. All right, so I think what I'm trying to say here is that as soon as Virginia made that horrible 6-mile trip from Mar-a-Lago to Jeffrey Epstein's front door, where she and her father were greeted by Ghislaine Maxwell. And by the way, Ghislaine did not let her father into the house. She stepped out of the house, according to Virginia Giuffre's deposition. And then, when she was taken upstairs, that's when she was assaulted. All of these sound like it's the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't seem to me to be plausible that these are independent of each other. It seems to me like they are part of the same covert operation, if you will. So like anyone who has children that are filmed with very powerful politicians, for example, let's use Bill Clinton, let's use Bill Richardson, Prince Andrew, even Donald Trump, any politician, any person of power. And in this case, and in all of the cases, some of the people of the FBI were compromised. In fact, the FBI refused to help the parents of some of the Franklin children, or because in the Franklin scandal, it wasn't just Boys Town. They would literally pick up children off the streets in the way they picked up Johnny Gosch from Iowa, who was not part of the Boys Town home for boys. So that whoever has control of these children and has filmed them in compromising positions with people of power, they're the ones who hold these blackmailed, powerful people in their control, so that these people then become their puppets. So, for example, when Virginia Giuffre spotted former President Bill Clinton on Jeffrey Epstein's private island, she asked him, "What is he doing here?" And Epstein responded, "He owes me a favor." And as we know, we've seen many photographs of Clinton with Epstein. And in fact, Clinton was one of the people who wrote a letter to the court when Jeffrey Epstein was being indicted in Palm Beach after 30 girls stepped forward, minor girls stepped forward to out him as having molested them, and in some cases, obviously, gone further than that. So what I want to leave you with now, I don't want to make this very long, is what are your thoughts about this? The fact that the finders, the Johnny Gosch case, even let's say Kincora, because we have Roy Cohn, who is known to have abused some boys from Kincora. We have Jimmy Savile, who we know was very friendly with Prince Charles, who is Prince Andrew's brother. I don't know about you, but I kind of suspect this is all one big covert operation, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. So with that, I'm gonna thank you for listening. Ask you to see, I'm remembering, like the video, subscribe. Okay, it's Kirby Summers for the Epstein Project podcast. Thank you for listening. Bye.